Welcome to this week's Force Friday with Swenley Matunje and myself, Mike Mattesi. How's it going, guys? How are you doing?
Awesome. Looking forward to tonight. One of my favorite subjects, which is
form. Yeah.
And form.
But you, Matunje. Welcome to this week's Force Friday. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. I'm more excited than Sculpting because it's sculpting day,
Yeah, sculpting and form, perspective. Some things that I had dreaded, I guess, when I was younger. I have to say perspective was not a fun subject until you get to know it well enough to, to make it easy, I guess, like anything else. And then it's like a superpower, right?
Yeah. So funny enough, that's how I learned to draw. Like that was my first education in drawing. It was perspective. So I learned to love it from the beginning.
It's funny. When I think of perspective, it takes me back to 7th grade. I was in middle school. I can't remember the art teacher's name right now. She taught us, so it's weird. She taught us perspective, and she taught us wrong perspective and right perspective, but said they were both perspective, right? Like she taught us the box with the flat front, and then how to extrude it on the diagonal, which is wrong. And then she taught us how to do a grid. And I remember us doing assignments with the grid with different geometric forms, and we had to light them. And I did enjoy that. I guess I really recognize just like how powerful that actually is. Like just the fact that as an artist, as a young artist, for the first time, you're creating like 3-dimensional space on a 2-dimensional plane, and that's pretty damn powerful stuff. So, so today, everyone, we are going to take a look at form, and we're going to do this as a series. You can see the eyeball here above my head. I want to focus on the concept that seeing is really important, and it's really the first step. If you can't see this stuff, then you're not really going to be able to like learn it, right? Now, I'm going to have put my foot in my mouth there, because I have met in my life artists that have learned to draw from imagination entirely, right? Like their full education had nothing to do with seeing. So you can do it. Like I've seen people do it. I think it's pretty difficult. I learned from observation. Observation allowed me to see the world more clearly. And then from that, you couple that again with thinking, right? We got the eyeball, brain, and hand equation. So the brain is all of the, let me understand what I'm looking at. I could see, I want to see clearly and not lie, right? And then be able to understand what I'm seeing. And then this like cyclical thing starts to happen, because then you see more. Because you've learned more, you start to see even more, and therefore you learn more, and it keeps going round and round. And then we bring the hand into that experience, right? And you finally have a whole equation to create an illustration. So that's, like I said, that's going to be the focus today. I'm pretty much going to go over a vast majority of the curriculum that we teach actually at drawingforce.com, as the videos on the website for form. Premium members go through that with some guidance. And then any of the students that we mentor, of course, we take them through all these steps with us, helping them through them. I do have to say, in general, form is probably the one place that takes the longest out of force, form, and shape as, let's say, and anatomy. When it comes to the duration of time it takes to really understand the subject. Form for some people is a pretty fast walk, but for most, I would say it's the place that takes the most time. So we're going to try to share with you some of the tricks today that that we use, and I love metaphors, so there'll be a whole bunch of metaphors in here also. And let's do it, because we have a ton of content to cover. Let's get over to Photoshop. Okay. So here's the thumbnail, right? It's about seeing. This is called wrapping, and we're going to talk about that later. And here you can see Mr. Hitchcock. A student actually brought this in, and it just cracked me up so much to see Alfred Hitchcock on the set of The Birds. And then them putting him in a box, which I thought was just hysterical. So I threw that in there. So here's what we talked about last week, and I'm going to bring in at the beginning of each one of our sessions for the next few weeks. Last week, we talked about seeing form, right? Force, and trying to understand it, right? And that there's this learning curve you go through, right? And hopefully it gets more vertical. You get to a place where you have a pretty darn good understanding, hopefully 100% of like, I really understand force. And then all of a sudden form comes in. It's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And then we go through this dip, and then you go through the climb. It's almost like drapery, right? Up and down, up and down, up and down with these sags of information until you get to the next level. So first step in knowing form is perspective, okay? There's no way around this. I have tried, okay? I can promise you, as someone who's been there that did not want to learn perspective, really, I've tried. I tried every trick in the book to get away with it. And finally, in the middle of college, I was like, I just got to swallow this pill. I've got to do it. I have to learn how this works, okay? So you got to learn perspective. This is an assignment we do with all of our students. I teach 4-point perspective, and then how that even works all the way out to a full 360-degree circle around you. You would have numerous 4-point grids basically around your person. You can see here, this student took in one of their pieces of art and put it in here. So something that's interesting, I want all of you to be aware of. I grabbed this picture of a street corner, right? Any photograph that you can take, which means it's also anything that you therefore can draw, can be put in this grid. Okay, so you want to learn like how that works. Like, you know, the 4-point grid is representation of the human eye and how that works. And I want you to be aware of that, right? So we could take this photo. It's like, well, where does this photo fit in this grid? Well, you know, I could see that down the left side, things are angling down and up, which means the horizon to this is probably about head level. It feels like somebody on the opposite corner of the street took this picture, and it's probably about the same height as the guy leaning against the wall, right? So I would have to shrink this down to make the angles here, right on this side. You can see if I put it up here against that angle, right? It's like starting to match. And this is actually not too far off. And I look at the bottom and I'm like, it's a little strong, right? So I might have to shrink this down. Here, I'm going to zoom in here more. Okay, and then let's shrink this guy down. So you see, I have this angle here, right here from the roof into that line. It's like, well, does that roof line fit in there? That feels like it might have to come up a little bit, right? So I have to nudge left and right, scale up and down. But if I keep doing this, I'm going to get this to a place where it's going to fit in my grid. Now, actually, to tell you the truth, it'll probably be much smaller, which I'm going to do in a moment, because you'll notice the verticals are not pinching anywhere near as much as the verticals are in my picture. And if you want less pinching, you have to make the image really small, which is normally how your eye sees. Something has to be gigantic for you to really see like vertical pinching in the top or bottom points, really, you know, huge, or you have to have something really close to your face. If you get a box right up against your face, you're also going to see the pinch, right? So I would kind of keep shrinking this down, playing with the angles, right? Like you'll notice there's not much angle on the bottom. So the horizon, like I said, you can see this black line here is going to run into these guys somewhere around here. And I just got to watch these angles. Now, this angle is stronger than this one, right? So I might have to go up. So that's going to trap me. Like I have to watch that angle relative to this. So I think I could actually go a little bit bigger. You see? And I'm like, it's really strong. I might have to come up over here. I'm starting to move myself to the left. So that means the picture, the point over there is closer, right? I'm going to push myself to the left to get that angle and up. I can't go too far up. So I got to play with scale because I have to watch the horizon line relative to the guy. You see, so this is starting to work. I'm trying to get that angle to match up to that. I have to get over to the left-hand side. I'm still trying to keep the horizon line. You notice the bottom is starting to work. You see, that's starting to feel like it's almost there. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but what I want you to see is you can take hundreds of photographs and basically scale them up and down and tweak them and find out where they fit, because this is the human eye. This is how a camera works. You can find out how this system all comes together. Okay, so perspective is the first thing. 4-point grid. Again, just to give you a quick sketch here. It relates to the eyeball, right? Things are bigger and more tweaked out, you know, over here in the middle, right? And then they get squeezed down in the ends, right? Like looking through a fisheye lens. So that's why I teach this way. Okay, to me it makes total sense. Right, and Swelling Return and I all teach the perspective in this way. And if the world kept going that way, which it does, you would have another 4-point perspective, and you'd have another vertical here, by the way, too. Like this would get set up like this, and you would move your way into another 4-point grid, like all the way over here. Okay, so it's like looking at streets. You know, this would be like one street, right? And then you go down the other side, you have another street, right? As you looked around yourself. So here's already like looking down 2 different blocks. you see? And that would do a full 360 around your head, okay? And there's a lot more. I'm being brief here. There's a lot more to learn, like how do you handle perspective when you're out in the middle of a field? I mean, there are no man-made 90-degree angles. What does that look like, right? How do you deal with what looks like one point? Because one point is usually not one point. Usually there's more than one point, especially in like interior design and so on. You know, you see pictures of interiors. So there's all kinds of other stuff to cover there. I don't have time for all that today. I want to give you an overview of, you want to learn how to see this, okay? Go out in the world, draw on location, draw reportage, you know, which is drawing on location, and try to see this, right? Try to see this space, try to sketch out, you know, be aware of angles to help you see perspective, okay? Now that's important because as we talked about, maybe about 6 months ago or so, I talked about absolute and relative perspective. So this is absolute, right? This means this is like the world perspective. And when it comes to figure drawing, our model would stand in here. The model might be in a box. It's something like this. And this makes a big difference when drawing the figure, because most students, when they draw the figure, they flatten out the figure as if they're more like this, right? They have their piece of paper and they draw the model flatly. You want to try to gain awareness of like looking up at the model and looking down. When you're in a real physical space in the real world with a model, I think that actually is a little easier to get a sense of that. I'll usually have students draw the horizon line, just simply a line to just see that like, okay, my eye is here. I'm looking up, everything. I have to be where the angle's looking up and looking down. Once I started building up drawingforce.com again about 5-6 years ago, and then we're not in a classroom, right? We're working digitally. I started asking students to put a box around the model, right? And that's what you see here on Alfred Hitchcock, right? So the whole point of this is, can you look at a model now and can you find the box? Can you find the box of space and have that model's box, right? The box they're standing in be within that grid. So you get a sense of where the horizon is. What you're trying to get out of this is the looking up and the looking down or looking left and looking right, right? You want to see general planes and you want to get a view of, I see up, I'm looking underneath their chin or I'm looking down, right? I could see the tops of their feet and the sides of their feet, and that affects your work pretty dramatically too. And hopefully we'll get you out of the trap of, you know, drawing flatly, right? Okay, so we've got all this structure, right? Let's keep moving on here. Here's our photo. So that brings us to, once you understand the grid well enough and you've drawn lots of boxes in the grid, and I even recommend that you draw kind of like creative scenes. I have one student I mentor has been drawing boxes in the grid for months, numerous boxes, almost like he's creating 3D worlds, right? Like just lots of different boxes stacked and, you know, stuck into one another. Sometimes combining forms, you might put a sphere into a box. Like, what does that look like, right? How do you do that? So just a lot of that kind of stuff mixed together. I think that's great exercise to understand how that all works. As you keep doing that, you are training yourself to see how perspective functions. And you want to combine that, I think, with drawing outside, right? Like drawing out in the real world and seeing how perspective works. Like look in your house right now, look in your room, look at the ceilings. You'd be amazed as to how strong those angles actually are. They're way more dramatic and aggressive than you probably think they are. Now, once you get all that done, you get over here. It's like, okay, have I learned enough from the grid to get rid of the crutches of the grid and take a box and turn it in space, right? So that's like I said, it's like taking the, you know, making the grid invisible, seeing it in your mind, right? That you're like turning this box with the grid, but you're just drawing the box. Now, this particular student, I just grabbed this from samples I have of students' work. This is student work. You can even extend these lines. In fact, I prefer that, especially at the beginning where you do something like this, right? So, you know, you get a sense of like the grid is there. It's like, you know, the leftover of it, right, is still there. The residue is there of the grid, right? You can see that it's there, but you're not having to draw the whole grid anymore. And there's lots of tricks again for doing this, but I want you to be aware, to me, this is like the next step. So you learn from the grid, you start understanding what things should look like. And then you come over here and you try to get to just drawing the box without the grid. This is called relative perspective, right? Because now it's relative. It's just the small pieces themselves. So when you have a model, right, you might have a model that's standing in a box, but all of a sudden the model's head, right, is like this, right? And their chest is like this, right? And their pelvis is like this, you know, and you're like, oh my God. Every one of these boxes, by the way, really has its own grid. And you don't want to be sitting there going, well, this is the box the model's standing in. This is box number 1. This is perspective number 2, grid number 2, right? So there's the grid for the model that they're standing in, the world or absolute. Then there's this, then there's this, then there's this one. There's another horizon line down here. You see, so that would drive you insane. You want to learn how to leave the grid and just draw the boxes, okay? Let's see, I see some questions here. When drawing from life, how do you deal with the fact that everything changes when you move your eyes around? I struggle with this when I draw outside my cone of vision. How do you deal? I'm not sure what you mean by changes. I see, when you move your eyes around. Well, things shouldn't change really that much based on you moving. Things are moving, of course, right? And maybe you're being a little maniacal, Mr. Pasta, right? Because I would say get the general perspective and then start tying things down. I have an assignment where I have students draw on a piece of plastic so you can have a little window to the world and draw on top of it to see. You know, and if you move that a little bit or you move a little bit, like, oh my God, everything is off, right? Like it doesn't work, but that's fine. It's not like it's got to be the exact thing. You want to understand how to see, right? It's like, I always say it's like the Matrix, right? Like there's this thing that's invisible. It's been around you your entire life. And now you start to learn it's been here your entire life, right? Since the day you were born, perspective has existed. And for the first time, you're actually getting to look at it, right? So average it out. You know, if you're sitting drawing on location, which is amazing, average out the perspective and then start dealing with the buildings. You know, keep grabbing from the reference and plugging it into your master scheme, right? Okay, so this is all the relative stuff. Now, after relative, we get even more specific. So you'll notice we're going from big to medium to small, right? And this is a loaf of bread. What does a loaf of bread have to do with any of this, right? So I just came up with this metaphor maybe in the last 2 years or so. What I have students do is once they understand the box and we start bringing construction to the figure, right? So let's say I have, here's like a rear end and here's a leg, right? So here's a kneecap, right? Just drawing a leg, a generic leg. Okay, so here's a leg. What I have students do is draw a turning edge, which is one of the corners of the box, right? So let's draw that. So here's a turning edge, right? This is, I'm going to label this TE. So we have this turning edge. And then I would have them do cross contours, right? So cross contours, you have to know the perspective that the leg is in, right? And I usually say like, do one in the middle and go down the side, right? Like so. And then in between that to the end and that to the end. So the hip's here, the knee is here. So maybe we put one more here and we put like one more here, right? So that's cross contours, CC, and turning edges. You can go through the body with this too, right? You can see like, you're starting to see like there's the box of the leg. Well, I started recognizing, oh, that's like a loaf of bread. I was looking for something that students would understand, right? Loaf of bread is structured, it's in perspective, it's solid, right? So this is like slicing a loaf of bread. You got to get these angles right. They can't be wrong. Otherwise you break the loaf of bread, right? Like the slices all have to be lined up with one another, okay? You can't do this. Let's see, like I can go like this. Maybe I get half of it right, and then I do that. That doesn't work. That's like one of these tilted over slices of bread, right? It doesn't work. It needs to, I want it standing up. So what I'm drawing here in red would be like going to this loaf of bread and going over here and saying, yeah, you know what? I still understand the form of it. I'm going to slice it, but I'm going to stay within the form of the leg. You see, like so, right? So it all has to work like that. So therefore we have the loaf of bread, right? So that's the next step, right? So we've gone through perspective, We have gone through, so that's in, absolute perspective, putting models in boxes. We've gone through the idea of relative perspective, drawing boxes without the grids, trying to leave the grid to see if you can turn a box in space. You try to bring that over to the body now, because the body, every part of the body is like a box moving in perspective. Now we have the loaf of bread. We've got turning edges, cross contours, right? We're trying to really understand each area because we're trying to get away from having to draw perspective for every box, right? Super, super difficult, okay? But you got to learn that perspective in order to draw the box, right? So here's an image of turning edge, right? Here, let me go to this first, actually. A great place to start with this is this, right? So here's a photograph of the model, and I have the students go over this and try to block it out. Can you see form? Can you see the turning edges and the cross contours? And then here, this is Julia's. She's a premium member at drawingforce.com. And you can see how this starts to work, right? I love that she kept this drawing alive, right? It's very easy to kill the model when you go into form, right? So that's one of the things that us three instructors try to help students with, is keeping things alive while bringing in structure. Now, Julia, I have to say, is pretty darn clever, because she also grabbed a picture where the girl's holding a box, right? Like, to me, that's always, I'm aware of that, okay? Nothing gets past me, believe me, not visually. At least maybe audibly, definitely, but not visually. And I'm like, damn, that's clever. Julia was clever enough to find a model holding a box, right? And this whole idea is about structure and perspective. So she got that model with the box, and then now she's also bringing these more fluid boxes to the body, right? And you can see all the turning edges, and you see how, man, this is magic, right? Suddenly you have a structured figure. Now, I'm aware that to get here, our students go through a lot of force basics first, and it's challenging. It's challenging because everyone wants to just get a darn good drawing done. And, the three of us have to convince them that before you get over here and you get so proud about your structured, more full finished drawings, you got to learn about force, right? We want all that fluidity happening. We want things to connect. We want those relationships, because we want you to understand function. Then we can understand, these forms look the way they do because of how things are moving, right? So here's, like I said, yeah.
I think this is what actually takes time, because first you need to learn perspective and form and structure in the boxes and primitives and how to put them in perspective, and then you have to keep it alive, which is like bringing the basics, which means dynamism and the structure together. So I think that what adds up to the time of like learning the force form,
Yeah, that's true. It's very, this is like the biggest hiccup. Again, because I love metaphors. My metaphor here is that, we're all doctors, and you got to keep the darn models alive, right? Because it's so easy to kill them, just to brute force them with form, basically kill them with blocks, right? You don't want to do that. It's like throwing rocks at them, right? So we have these blocks, and we want to keep them alive and solid, right, at the same time. So this is a challenge. And a lot of schools, they might have a gesture drawing class where they get students maybe even scribble out like a gesture, and then they get them to boxes and they teach them to draw rigid boxes. You don't want to do that. You want boxes that have flow. Look, there's tons of structure in this, but it's within the silhouette of the figure. She didn't even draw boxes really, right? She found the turning edges and cross contours within the forces of this body. So the drawing is staying alive, right? And that's what we want. And it's not only the drawing, it's you as the artist, you're needing to stay alive, right? You have to observe this life in the model and keep that going while trying to get all this form in there, right? So that's the next step, right? Now what we do after this is we start to lean off the analness of all this, the maniacalness of angles, to say, okay, you probably know this well enough for us to go over and kind of simplify this down to what I call wrapping. So here in wrapping, here's some photographs of a guy with circles painted around his arms. You'll see when the arm is down, right, that the lines are pretty straight. And look how different that is to when his arm is coming out towards us in foreshortened perspective, right? They're much more round, right? They become a circle, right? So you've got from the circle to the straight line. And you can see that here too, straight lines to these tighter circles, right? Because of the foreshortening. This is what your eye needs to see. you need to be able to see these lines without those lines existing on the model, because you don't usually have models that are there with lines drawn or painted on them, okay? This is your job as the artist, is to understand those ellipses, those wrapping lines in perspective, and how you're gonna later get anatomy to do that for you, right? Here's another photograph of a model in this outfit with stripes. Stripes are great, right? Stripes are great for form. I know some of the other websites, other schools, I think one of them had a model that I saw with like tights on that had stripes on them. That's awesome, right? So you could see lots of form, right? Lots of structure. So, you know, watch for that as well, right? This is another way of seeing it. So you want to be able to bring this wrapping over. So this I happen to have here in the drawing in the thumbnail. Let me see, let me get rid of that. There. So that's what's going on here. I have the eyeball looking at that. You'll see here that there's lots of wrapping, right? What's happening in the wrapping is I'm looping around this. This is, by the way, this is a 1 minute drawing, right? So this is 1 minute, and it was huge. It was like 3 feet tall. So it's a big drawing at 1 minute. So I'm working incredibly fast. I'm just like shooting from the hip, hoping I get the whole darn thing done in 1 minute. And I'm just like, round, right? Like faster, trying to get all the force out of this. And that's why you can see me even here. Look, I was going so fast that I didn't even wrap around the leg to create the tube of this leg, right? The tube of this leg is something like this. I went like this. I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I didn't even go all the way around just because I was trying to save time. So I looped just the back end of it, which is like a half circle, basically, right? So that was my shortcut to get that space to happen. And here I almost corkscrewed it, right? I went like this, and I kept doing this and bring down. You got to watch the corkscrew thing because you can lose the right angle of perspective. So it's a little of a tricky one. So I just want you to see what we did is we turned the box into an ellipse. Now, when you learn on drawingforce.com how to draw those boxes that we talked about before, after the boxes, you learn primitives, which are like cones and tubes and so on. So you learn that, when you have a plane like so, you figure out how to find the center of it, and you figure out how to draw an ellipse in that space, which is why when we went to the figure and we did the loaf of bread, right? So here's our loaf of bread. Remember, the leg's knee was like here. And I started doing this, right? I have a turning edge in the loaf of bread. I'm aware that this goes through here and that an ellipse sits in there, you see? So now this leg, which is more tubular than it is square, I can make elliptical. But the reason I can do that ellipse is because I understand what that plane is, what that slice of bread is in the leg, to put an ellipse around that form correctly, you see? So that's that process there. And that's why we go on those steps. Believe me, the steps have been defined over time with me teaching lots of students and going, this would be better in front of this, and this would be better in front of this, And I'm still always trying to bring in new metaphors or ways of teaching it. Like I said, the loaf of bread idea is new. If you mentioned a loaf of bread to someone I taught in 2006, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Where's the butter? Right? Where's the toaster? Where's the butter? Cream cheese, whatever your preference is. I'm not into loaves of bread. I like bagels. So let's go to ellipses, right? See, that's new. I just came up with that. We'll have to bring the bagel in. We're going from the loaf of bread to the bagel. That's how it works, folks. You just saw it happen right here. A new metaphor has been born.
Funny.
Okay. Say what?
Funny.
Yeah. The loaf of bread. So after that, that finally brings us over to the next level of detail, which is sculpting. So we've gone from perspective, we've gone from boxes, right, to relative perspective, boxes on the body, which is loaves of bread. Loaves of bread have turned into wrapping around forms because we got ellipses and something that's a little bit more round, right? Now, the different parts of the body are different geometric forms, right? Like your knee and your elbow are a little bit more angular, and your head, right, are more angular. So that's usually where box forms are. You could do the pelvis as a box form, or even the rib cage. And then the lengths, the tubes, are more round. So I try to get students, and this is a new thing, actually. I've been lately, Mattesi and Swenley don't even know this. The last couple of weeks, I've been pushing into try to coupling that a little bit more. Like saying the leg is the tube, the knee is the box. And be aware how those two things combine. And that there's a metamorphosis that happens right between those two moments, right, of trying to combine those two structures, right? And then after that, now we really get down to the nitty gritty of it all, which is sculpting, right? So now it's about surfaces. And you can't draw successful sculpting and surfaces without all the other stuff I just talked about. This is Frank Frazetta, who of course is one of my favorite artists of all time. Why? Because he's a force artist, right? This stuff is fluid. Look at the ink lines. I know he's known for his paintings. I love his drawings as well, and that's what we're teaching. So look at these drawings. Look at how much force they have. He's sculpting light and shadow, anatomy, and so on, but also force in his work, right? And that's getting us through this illustration. He's using it compositionally. There's lots of different things going on. So students learn to do this, right? Some students get through this pretty quickly, but I would say for the most part, this also takes some time. We actually usually start with Gibson because Gibson's a little bit more, less forceful, but just more structural. And we finally wean our way over to Frazetta, who's doing both. To me, this piece, I don't know who owns it in the world. I would love to be the owner of this. If you know where it is, I want to buy it because I would love to have this in my house. But this should be in like a, you know, in like the Met in New York City. Like this is a masterpiece, this image, this illustration. So we try to get students to learn this, right? And here's an example of a student's work. This is Arno. He's a premium member at drawingforce.com. Here he is testing out surface line, sculpting, trying to get line to create form and to create force at the same time, right? Very challenging, I have to say, challenging space, right? So we're trying to make all of this now come together. You can't do this unless, again, you know perspective and you know the loaf of bread, you know your absolute perspective, you know your relative perspective and so on, right? It takes all those skills to get here. If you see someone drawing like this out there and you're trying to copy them, like don't bother because all you're doing is copying. You need to know all the other stuff before you get here, right? And then you go look at their work and go, I understand. I understand what they're doing. I can see the forms that they're presenting and how they're doing it, right? So that kind of brings me to the end of my talk. I was going to go over that with Noe here. I have one thing. I think I'm going to hand it off to the guys real quick here. I'm not going to do the whole thing because Swanley and Mattesi are going to demo for you guys. But one thing I want you to be aware of is like an absolute perspective. Some students see this line on this like infinity wall back here and go, that's where the horizon is. That's not necessarily where the horizon is, okay? Just because you see a line back there, right? We're looking kind of top down on her. I would say the horizon on this is higher. You know, it might be like up here somewhere, okay? So just don't be fooled by that because the horizon, one way of thinking about it is if you were standing and looking straight out, you imagine your eyeball is like a laser beam or a laser light show at like a rock concert, right? And it's going to go straight out and it's going to hit the actual Earth's horizon somewhere. That's the line, right? It's like saying, here's the Earth and I'm standing here, right? There's the horizon. Well, I'm standing here now. If I'm looking to find the Earth, there's the horizon, you see? And you can create imagery where, you know, you draw a picture plane that's up here and you might not see the horizon at all. It's still down here. So it'll affect the perspective, right? Like let's say the horizon is down here, but we're looking up, right? So now I've got the horizon and everything is like this. There'd probably be some pinched perspective and 3-point like this, right? So you'd have, you know, a building that might look something like this, right? Because you are all the way down here with the horizon. So we don't see it, but in the picture is still affected by that perspective, you see? So when you look at photographs of models, try to imagine where the camera has been set, right? What is its height from the ground, right? Like here's the ground and where's the height of it off the ground? And when that thing looks straight out, that's where you're looking for the horizon line. It's like out here somewhere, okay? Okay, I'm gonna hand it off to Swanley and Mattesi. Swanley's going first. He's gonna talk to you a little bit more about structure and demo that. Thank you for listening, and let me get Swanley the power.
I'm like He-Man.
Yes, exactly. I should hand off like I said, some kind of sword when we do this. Right. Okay, there you go.
Yes, let's see. All right, so yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mike. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So let's see if we can I have about 15 minutes, I think, right?
Yeah. Yep.
15. So let's see how far we can get. Like Mikem and Tunja mentioned earlier, like this takes like weeks and weeks for us to teach normally. So we're just going to give you a quick overview. And ironically, I've been teaching this a lot to mentees. I have a couple of mentees in forced form. And it came down to seeing, you know, like I had to like draw over the photos and help them to see what I see, you know. So that's what I'm going to do mostly today. So let's start with a big picture, right? Which is seeing the box around the figure. And the metaphor I like to use is imagine that the model is an action figure that you bought and it's sitting in a box on your desk. What would that box look like and how does it fit around the action figure that you just bought? And start with a reference, like do yourself a favor and pick reference that makes the exercise easier, especially at the beginning, because you know you can pick a reference which there's like no reference points in the environment for you to like understand where the horizon is and such, and it just makes it harder, you know. So this one is quite easy to start with. First of all, because the model is sitting on a box and her body is quite pretty much aligned with the box, you know, like let's say the box is facing that way and so is the model in general, you know. So this makes it a lot easier for me to see it, you know. And plus there's a lot of foreshortening. It's not like a flat shot of the figure, so there is actually form for me to work with, you know. So let's try to, I like to start with the ground plane, like the base of the box. So I can use these guidelines now again, because the model is pretty much facing the same direction as the box. So I'm imagining like a line that is parallel to this one, for example. And as soon as so let's say we have a plane and we're looking down. So it's like a perfect front view, let's say, of a plane. So these are parallel lines, you know, and one perspective rule is that parallel lines in perspective converge towards a vanishing point. So as soon as we turn that plane in 3D space, these lines are going to meet each other, you know, like the parent and child metaphor that Mike likes to use. They're going to meet each other at the vanishing point, you know, and same for these lines. They're parallel to each other in a flat view. So in perspective, they're going to converge and meet in towards the vanishing point. So what you don't want is that once you get to the perspective of the plane, for this to happen, you know, that the parallel lines actually get farther and farther apart towards the vanishing point. So I have this line. I know that I want a plane that is just like an extension of this one. So I imagine like these lines going and meeting at the vanishing point. Same here. I can use this guy right here as my guide. You know, making sure that the lines converge, meaning that the closer we get to the vanishing point, the closer together these lines get. Let's see, so this is looking pretty good. Again, I can use this guy right here as my guide for this part of the plane. Let's draw through. See if the model was made out of glass. And let's see. This would be around here. Now, so now I have the ground plane, the base of my box, you know, using the box that the model is sitting on. Okay, so now we have to turn this into, we have to like extrude this box. So we're looking down at the model, like you can see the top plane of this box, right? Which shows us we are looking down. So the camera is somewhere up here, which means that there is a bit of 3-point going on, most likely. So let's test that on that box. So I can see this edge and this one, there's a very slight convergence. So notice if I extend these lines, they start going and meeting at a vanishing point that is off the page. Now, so I can use these lines to help me plot these lines. Now, so I'm looking at this guy right here and imagining a line that goes and converges with that one. And this one would be like this. And keeping these guys in mind, I need a line that's converging with this guy. Okay, so this is looking pretty good and believable. So this line has to converge with this one. Again, apply the perspective rule. Now, perspective is quite black and white. You know, where you apply the rules, it works. And if you don't, it doesn't. Okay, so this is a pretty good box for the model to fit in. You can draw through and add this edge as well. Now, so this all would go behind the model, so we can get rid of this. Now create a bit of overlap, so it's a bit clearer. Now, so this is step number one. Now, and with practice, you won't even need to draw this box. You know, like I was able to draw it because I could visualize it. You know, I could come in here, do the practice and just visualize and see, okay, this is the overall box that the model fits in. And usually I would just, especially when dealing with characters, I would just imagine like a simple grid. You know, it can be something like this. And I say, okay, I want the character to be like at this angle in space. You know, so I start a perspective grid and then I use that grid as like as a guide to place the character. You know, so it's like a simplified version of the box. So that's number one. That's the big picture, seeing the box around the figure. Now let's go to the figure itself and see how can we add form to the body, you know, bringing the idea of the box to the body. So as any good designer out there will tell you, form follows function. And as we have taught you in the past, force is function, you know, deals with how the body works relative to gravity. So before we add the forms, if they're going to follow the function, that means that the function or the forces come first. So here I see that the torso has a strong arc here at the front. You know, it's arcing and stretching. And here we have a clear compression, like notice the compression of the skin here, which tells me that the best way to show this action is a C curve. You know, it's like a reverse letter C. So that's step number one. You know, I have the torso here, and I see I have a couple of minutes left, so probably just going to do the torso. So just to keep it like quick and simple and bring together everything we've talked about so far, I tend to use wrapping because it's a bit faster. You know, it's less precise than a box, but I can see, okay, I see a little bit of the top of the torso here. And same here, like her top right here. All I have to do is like follow that line actually, you know, this nice wrapping line, which is showing me the direction of that volume. Same here. Now I can wrap around, just follow the line of her shorts here. So that's the first thing, the first like signs of form that I see. I also see the natural center. Now it's like the sternum and goes all the way to the belly button, going down here. And what I look for next, like this model is a bit trickier to see, but I look for the corners of the pelvis, you know, which are anatomically are called the iliac crest. You know, and usually depending on the body type, you will see these like sticking out, very prominent, you know, and those are exactly in the corner of that box. And actually go another layer here because we can see it more clearly with her top, you know. So in order to find the turning edge, I'm looking at how this is wrapping around. And where does it change direction? Where do we go from the front plane to the side plane? And you can see it's right around here. Here we start turning the corner. So here's where the corner of the form is, you know, because we go from here to the side, you know, so I know that this is then my turning edge, you know, and then I have to find that same moment here. So I can see it's around here. So it's pretty accurate. Now this we can pull down all the way to the bottom of the pelvis. You know, and the pelvis itself, we can imagine it as like a simple box, you know. So if I were to extend this and like ignore the legs for a minute, let's try to see, okay, where's the bottom of that pelvis? You know, it's actually the bottom of the rear end, like the gluteus muscles just wrap around that pelvis box. Now, so we have this, and then if we take these corners, you know, we can draw the like the triangle, the V shape towards the crotch. You know, and then one thing that students tend to forget is like this is a symmetrical box, right? We have the center here, which means that everything that's happening on this side needs to happen on the other side as well. So this line right here is from the front of the, or the side of the rib cage through the abdomen towards the crotch area. But I have this whole part here, you know, so if we were to draw like a front view of the pelvis box, and with female, it's usually a bit wider at the bottom, you know, so we have the corners and we have this V shape right here, you know, which is built right on the center. So we have this, and then we have the farther side of the box, but the same is happening on the other side, you know, so especially if it gets wider, I need a portion of the box here as well, you know, to complete that form. Now, and last but not least, we have the sockets for the thighs. And I like to use the like the underpants shape analogy. You need to be able to see how the thigh volumes like fits into the box. Like there's the sockets right here at the side, and the same is happening here. You know, so, and actually it's in 3 dimensions, so it would be a bit on the side plane as well. You know, so let's say the model lifts her leg up, then this socket becomes important to keep the thigh attached to the pelvis, you know, because then the thigh would be like this, for example. You know, if you just draw it as a shape, you know, it would be like this. If you lift her, she lifts it further up, it would be here. You know, so it's always like moving from the socket, like the joint of the thigh is right here in the middle of that socket. You know, so that's how I see, you know, I look for the corners of the form. And one other great landmark are the corner of the ribs. You know, if you can find these corners, and I see it's around here, and you connect them with a line, it gives you the angle of the box. You know, and the rib cage, of course, is a like a rigid bone structure. It cannot bend, which means that the angle of the top and the angle of the bottom are parallel to each other in a front view. And so they are in perspective. You know, like the shoulders, remember the shoulders attach here, or the arms, I would say, attach here at the clavicles, and the clavicles can move around freely. You know, like notice this one is lifted up. So a lot of times I see students getting misled by the angle of the shoulders and thinking that's the angle of the top of the torso automatically. And that's not always the case. You know, like when you're drawing the forces, it's fine, but once you get the structure, you need to be aware that, you know, the angles of the rib cage box have to be perpendicular to that center line. You know, otherwise in a front view, you will get a bent rib cage like this, which doesn't happen in reality. All right, so these are just some pointers for form. Hopefully it helped you guys, and I'm going to pass it to Metunjay.
Thank you, Swinley.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
very
you're
much.
welcome.
Great setup for me. All right. So my favorite part, finally the sculpting and the final state of form. So before we jump on to the demo, uh, we'll just have a look at like how the sculpting works and what it is and like why we bother, right? So let's imagine like there's a box, right? Again, I'm just gonna do like a very simple box here, like that, very simple box. Now, with the turning edges, right? It's when they set up the turning edge thing for me, right? So this is the turning edge. Now, this way, two ways to sculpt. Okay, so basically two ways of sculpting, right? One, you can go across, which is again the same as the wrapping lines. Okay, I also call it mummifying. Okay, mummifying, which is like used to mummify like dead bodies, basically. So yeah, just basically taking a stripe and just like wrapping it around, like that. So that is one way of sculpting, right? And the artist that we use as an idol, the idol artist like to who uses method a lot is Gibson. Okay, Charles Donna Gibson. So what he usually does, he usually does stuff called like something of faceting, right? What he does, what he do, basically, let's imagine that there's a cylinder in here, like this, and he's gonna say, okay, I'm gonna treat this as a cylinder, but I'm just gonna make it like low poly model of this. Okay, and some of you who are maybe like doing this 3D stuff, maybe know about this. If you just convert this to, let's say, a low poly model or something, it's gonna convert to, let's say, something like that, right? Like a hexagon or something. So now what Gibson is gonna do is say, okay, I'm just gonna take the cylinder and sculpt it like that. Okay. So first of all, he's going across the form with the wrapping or the mummifying, and he's basically converting that to faces. Okay, so he's not gonna see the full round form of it. He sees that, but he sculpted as like faces. Okay, like different, and he's really aware of these turning edges. He doesn't draw those turning edges like literally. He's like he don't do this, but what he does is like something like that. And that brings up the turning edges like very clearly in the sculpting. Okay, so that's the first way. The second way that you can sculpt something is, let's again take the box or like that. That's again like a box. You can, as you can see, like this box is actually having a direction. Okay, we can say it's having a force to it, it's like having the energy to it, and it says, okay, either this is going down there or like coming up. Basically because of its bend. Okay, so see this bend here. Okay, like that. So we get a direction of the force in here. Okay, like got some energy out of it. You cannot have that literally in this kind of box, which is like pretty stiff. It's like using straight lines in here, like that. So this is giving us some sort of direction, right? So we can say, okay, we have a direction. Now we can sculpt into that direction, okay, into this. So now what you're going to do is taking these long ideas, okay, and sculpt it into this direction, basically in the direction of the force. The artist, again, we have an idol that Mike introduced you to is Frank Frazetta, right? Pretty good, right? Very, like a great artist, right? And that was my favorite. Like, I also respect Gibson a lot, right? And he's doing like really awesome stuff. For me, it's mostly like the Frazetta, right? Because he's sculpting with the force, and I really want to see that, like the motion, in his sketches and the piece that Mike shows you. Okay, so I'm just gonna be doing like a quick demo for this. So let's take a photograph. I love this photograph, like Noe's photograph here, and a great model, a great pose, right, to sculpt it here. Okay, so starting off with the basics. Okay, this is where the basics, or we can say the fundamentals of force, comes with the structure that I was mentioning before, and that's why it takes a hell of time, to study that. And this is the toughest part. You have to like bring them together. You have to have a solid understanding of the structure and the perspective and the box and the turning edges. And you also want to sculpt, right? So you are putting like more of an artistic approach to it. Okay. So let's see. So because the force is the glue to it, glue to all of that, I'm going to start off with that. Okay. I'm gonna say, okay, she's like bending over here, you know, like that. And she's doing this, right? She's having this like great S rhythm to her body, like that. All right, so I'm gonna say, okay, this is the spine, right? She's doing this. She's doing this. I'm gonna keep it like very, very simple at the beginning, and then we're gonna move on to more nuances if you want to do that. All right, so why did that, right? That's the mummifying, or I mean, I'm not like doing too many of them, right? Maybe I do, right? If I just like want a quick like form out of it, but this is enough, you know, this is enough for me right now. And I can do two more in here just for the, see the clothing here, like the clothing is cheating, guys, like hands down. Like if the model wears like a small amount of clothing, just like Noe's wearing here, that's cheating, right? I mean, cheating as a way of, it gives you a quick form, okay? It tells you, okay, let's say where the leg is going, is it going deep inside, or is it coming out, or the body is going deep inside, or is it coming out, right? So you can say, we use clothing as the wrapping of the body, right? Very good. So anyway, so what it tells us, oh, this body is like going deep inside into that space, okay? All right, so coming off like that, I'm just giving, and this is still force, right? This is all force. I'm doing like nothing special in here. Just like quick forces, right? These are just like general templates, you know, that we use. All right, coming off here, there's a quick leg, quick foot, right? These are all the templates, okay, right? Now, with sculpting, you know, for me, why it comes natural, okay? Because see what I'm doing here is when I do like multiple lines on the same force line that I drew before, it is feeling, right? It is the expression, it is moving with force. But see what when I started to do this, just if I just shift my focus a little bit to the inside of the body, it started becoming the sculpting, right? Sculpting with force. Okay, so this is where the sculpting falls for me like very naturally. Okay, I remember like when I was introduced to sculpting, I was not actually introduced. I was just like doing this stuff, and this is how I discovered it. And I was like really happy. There's like something new that I found, right? And I was like pretty excited for that. Excited for that. That I found something new, but you know, anyway, so then I found like everybody's doing that. So anyway, so we're gonna make her balance. We're gonna make her balance because she's resting onto the arm there, right? Pretty amazing, right? Pretty amazing forces out there. Thumb is very important. I'm using all the like all the things that basically you have to use. Basically, I'm using the line contrast, right? I'm using the templates. I'm using the soft connections here, right? As you can see, it's like all the fours that we're using. Okay. All right. Now with the legs, with this clothing in the legs, I'm just gonna cheat a little bit. Okay. It's like a little bit confusing form. It's like going this and this. It's actually not respecting turning edge a lot, right? So I can say, I can just make it more simple for you guys right now and just make it more of a round thing, okay? Just for the sake of understanding. Right, this leg is going deep inside, so as you can see, the tube is mostly like this, the leg, and I just like did a wrap there, okay? Like that. All right, and there we go. So this is all the setup, right? This is all the setup I would at least say for sculpting, you know? You have to like figure out all the templates and everything. Yeah, I'm just like doing some quick shapes in here. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sculpt, right? Sculpt with within the direction of the force, okay? So because I set up all the soft touch in there, right? As you can see, like all my soft touches like set up in there. Now it's gonna help me to sculpt it more, okay? So I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna come up from here. See, I'm coming in the same direction as the force is moving, okay? Because she's moving this S rhythm like that, okay? I'm gonna move in the same direction. That and yeah, respecting form, you know, this is going there like this. Still like I'm still aware of all the turning edges and everything in there as well, right? See how this force is like moving into the butts there? It's moving there and eventually into the legs, okay? Like that. So this is actually the step where you want to slow down. And some people asking, oh, the force is like, it's all about quick gestures and it doesn't have long studies. This is where the long study happens, you know. Some when I teach it to mentees, you know, some people take like weeks and weeks, and I could do just one study, you know. And when we ask them to do the Frazetta thing, you know, we ask them to copy the Frazetta thing, and some people take like like a week or two, you know, to do that. Yeah, so really great. But it pays off, you know, it pays off in the end. Gives you like really cool results and like helps you, as I said, like combining like binding basics and structure together. So see, that's the arm direction. That's a force of the arm. Okay, so I'm moving here, like there, and moving here, like this. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah. So I can move into the legs like that. Like I can move something like that. See, this is just with the force. Just with the force. Now there's a lot more tricks, you know. I can say there's so many tricks actually, which I can't share right now because just because of the time, right? But you have to have, let's say, control, right? You have to control your line and say, okay, I'm gonna use like dark lines around the edge of the form. Let's say again, there's a cylinder. I'm gonna use like more dark lines at the edge, but as I coming to the top of the form, I'm gonna use more lighter lines and the lines which are more separated. So it gives like a sense of volume, right? Something like that. So now you really feel that, oh, it's rounded, you know, all of a sudden. Let's say here's the face that you see. Now, if you do all like everything within dark, see, it kind of makes it flat, you know. So a lot more tricks, you know, that I need to share with you, but maybe some more time, you know. So how we are doing on the time, right?
Ah, you're done.
Okay.
Right on the nose.
So this is it, you know. I created like one here as well, you know. As you can see, this is a lot better because every time when you speak and draw at the same time, it kind of ruins it. But here it is, you know. I would say. All right. So we can conclude the session, and thanks for joining. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Mattesi. Yeah, good work, guys. I look like I have a giant eyebrow over my head. So thank you everyone for coming to this Force Friday. Again, if you're interested in learning more about Force or just drawing even in general, come visit us at drawingforce.com. There are different membership tiers. There's standard, which gets you access to all the videos. There's premium, where you get feedback from me on a monthly basis. And then there is the ultimate crown of mentorship, which is you working with one of us one-on-one to help you learn how to draw, right? And help you hopefully obtain the goals that you're after. So that's it. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week. We will see you next Friday. Next Friday, we're going to talk about shape. All right, we're going to talk about seeing shape with your eye, trying to witness it in reality, and then how do you bring that over to your drawing? What's the use of it? Why are we talking about shape in the first place? What does it mean? And so on. Okay. Thank you again, Swami Matunjay. I will see all of you next weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Here.
See ya.